I have never in my life been as ashamed to be a reader as I am right now. I wish I was illiterate so that I didn't understand a single word of what I just read. Excuse me for sitting in front of a bunch of giant cardboard boxes. I'm currently in the middle of moving into my new apartment and I haven't unpacked my couch yet. The only furniture I put together is this table that you're standing on right now and this chair. But you know who should have moved to a new place a long time ago? The main character from November 9. I made a video about Colleen Hoover's other book, Verity, which a lot of you seem to enjoy. Although enjoy might not be the right word for it. It was more like bafflement, like watching a car wreck that you couldn't turn away from. However, Verity is a thriller book and apparently Colleen Hoover primarily writes romance books. So as I go through her resume, I'm starting to find out the way that she tackles what she perceives to be romance. So this video is going to be a summary of everything that happens in November 9, or at least anything that I found relevant. I will be reading out loud quotes from the book and sharing screenshots because a lot of times when I talk about these books, I know people will not believe me when I read out loud the lines, and I need to show you proof that yes, this was published and a team of people had to approve this. So to give you some context about the book, November 9 is a best-selling novel by the best-selling author Colleen Hoover. On Goodreads, it has an average rating of over 4 stars, which is exactly why I don't trust people. This follows a very unusual love story between a boy and a girl, and they decide to do an experiment where they will only meet each other once a year. This experiment obviously makes the romance a lot more difficult with miscommunication, but we gotta do it for the sake of the plot, I guess. They also want to do this experiment because the main guy wants to write a novel based on their love story. The synopsis reads, "Tragedy and an unspoken truth threaten to tear them apart, but the experiment results in a manuscript that heals them both." Funny how this particular manuscript by Colleen Hoover did the exact opposite of healing for me. Sometimes after reading certain books, you tend to lose more brain cells than actually gain any. So while it can be very entertaining to talk about these books, I do want to remind you that sometimes it's important to actually gain brain cells and try to learn new skills. So please remember to do some exercises for your brain after this video. For example, you could do that by practicing new languages. And that's why I'm glad that Babbel is a sponsor of today's video. Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world. Learning new languages has always been very difficult for my brain to retain, and I always gave up on it because it was just so hard to memorize everything. But I was pleasantly surprised when I was using Babbel because I started taking their French courses since I was visiting Paris earlier this year. Like I would just do a quick lesson for like 3 minutes or something when I'm in my bed or like sitting at the desk. I literally don't have to move at all. And I really like that their lessons are designed by real language teachers. So a lot of the stuff that they teach you is stuff that you would actually use in real world conversations. They are scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in 3 weeks, and they offer a 20-day money-back guarantee. Le manteau.
La clé.
La clé.
La table.
La table. They also offer live classes, so you get 2 free classes with your subscription, and you even have the option for a lifetime subscription. So if you're interested in trying them out, you can click on the link in my description to get 60% off of your subscription. If you do try it out, let me know what language you're learning and why. And now let's go ahead and dive into the mess that is November 9. Basically, what you need to know first is that the main girl, her name is Fallon. She is the daughter of divorced parents. Her dad in particular was once a famous actor, so obviously the most natural career path that every Nepo baby does is to follow their father's footsteps and try to be an actor as well. Except Fallon is probably the only Nepo baby in the world who actually would have a hard time having a successful career because of her father. And we learn why in this passage where it's explained why November 9, which is the day that the entire book takes place in, is such an important date because of what happened to her when she was 16 years old. It's been 2 years to the day since my father's home was engulfed by the fire that almost claimed my life. Maybe that's why I wanted to see my father today. Maybe I hoped he would remember, say something to comfort me. I know he's apologized enough, but how much can I actually forgive him for forgetting about me? I only stayed at his house once a week on average, but I had texted him that morning to let him know I would be staying that night. So one would think that when my father accidentally catches his own house on fire, he would come rescue me from my sleep. But not only did that not happen, he forgot I was there. No one knew anyone was in the house until they heard me scream from the 2nd floor. This whole scenario is tragic on so many levels because at the time when she was 16, she was an up-and-coming actress. She had a bunch of things booked, but because of her injuries from the fire, that pretty much tossed all of her dreams away. It's also tragic that her own dad forgot that she was in the house when most people would run in to grab their dog if there was a fire. But perhaps the most tragic part of all of this is that we now know that Colleen Hoover is writing a main character who has body disfigurement. Knowing her track record, this is not bode well at all. So chapter 1 starts off on the second anniversary of the fire that left her scarred. Fallon is 18 years old at this point. She meets her father for lunch, and you can tell that it's a strained relationship and she still holds a lot of resentment. And you can also tell that the dad is a piece of shit because aside from the whole fire fiasco, there's this lovely line here that just exemplifies his character. She says, "You're impossible. Now I understand why mom left you." To which he replies, "Your mother left me because I slept with her best friend. My personality had nothing to do with it." Oh, right, yeah. Your ex-wife divorcing you and your daughter hating you definitely has something to do with your personality, because that is such a shining part of your character, along with your forgetfulness. During this lunch, the dad tells Fallon that he's getting married, and she points out that this is his 5th proposal, to which he replies, "But only the 3rd wife." And she says, "You make me want to swear off men forever." Which is funny, because this is also how I feel whenever I read a Colleen Hoover book. But he says something to her that I think just exemplifies how douchey he is. He says, "That shouldn't be a problem. I've only known you to go on 1 date, and that was over 2 years ago." You know what also happened 2 years ago? When you forgot that your daughter was about to be roasted like a fucking marshmallow in your own house. Obviously, he wasn't using his brain when he said that, but it's too late. And since this was such a low blow, this is basically the part where the main guy swoops in to save the day. So it turns out that this guy was listening to their conversation in the booth behind them, and he takes this as a moment to slide into her seat next to her, and he goes, "Sorry I'm late, babe. You know how LA traffic is." And he plants a kiss on the side of her head, and he introduces himself as her boyfriend. Now, rather than be creeped out by this, Fallon is actually into it because her daddy issues are so much stronger than her common sense for why the hell the stranger just planted a kiss on the side of her head. Something that this guy, who introduces himself as Ben, had overheard during their conversation was that Fallon was telling her dad that she plans on moving to New York because she wants to be an actress on Broadway, and her flight actually leaves tonight. Her dad doesn't think that this is a good idea, and he says that any dreams or opportunity for her to be an actress died the same night that the fire happened, which he does take responsibility for. But you know, it's been 2 years. At first, the apologies were abundant, but now it's kind of like been less and less. But the point is, he thinks that she should pursue another career. So when he swoops in to pretend to be her boyfriend, he also comes to her defense, and he says that there are plenty of actors who have physical injuries that still found success in Hollywood, and this is no reason to discourage Fallon. They go back and forth on it. He insults the dad. So now that the dad is pissed off, he decides to just walk out of the restaurant. So now that it's just Fallon and Ben together, we switch over to Ben's perspective. At this point, you would think, wow, he must be actually a pretty stand-up dude, because he is the love interest of this romance book after all, and he did just stand up for this girl. So as we peek into his psyche, his inner monologue says, "I wish I could say I'm mentally preparing a brilliant apology, but I'm not. I seem to have a one-track mind, and that track leads straight to the 2 things I shouldn't even be thinking about right now. Her boobs, both of them. I know, I'm pathetic, but if we're just going to sit here and stare at each other, it'd be nice if she were showing a little cleavage instead of wearing this long sleeve shirt that leaves everything to the imagination. It's pushing 80 degrees outside. She should be in something a lot less ... Coven inspired. That's probably why she's wearing a long sleeve shirt. It shields everyone from seeing what's beneath it." And of course, this thought leads me to her breasts again. Are they scarred too? How much of her body is actually affected? I begin to mentally undress her, and not in a sexual way. I'm just curious, really curious, because I can't stop staring at her, and that's not like me. So this guy's just mentally undressing her because he's just so curious about the scars underneath her body, which is so not violating at all. I just really appreciate how Colleen Hoover portrays such a range for her male characters. She truly shows the duality of men, where a guy can defend your humanity, but then also objectify you within the same page. So the 2 of them talk to get to know each other a bit. We find out that he's taking a class in creative writing. They continue their banter about fake dating, and this is really where we get to see how witty these 2 are. So she says, "Should we break up now?" I laugh, even though I'm still attempting to discern if she's got an incredible deadpan wit or absolutely no personality at all. There's a fine line between the 2, but I'm betting it's the former. Hoping it is, anyway. We haven't even been dating an hour yet, and you already want to dump me? Am I not very good at this boyfriend thing? She smiles, a little too good. It's weirding me out, to be honest. Is this the moment you break the ultimate boyfriend illusion and tell me you knocked up my cousin while we were on a break? I can't help but laugh again. Definitely deadpan wit. I didn't knock her up. She was already 7 months pregnant when I slept with her. An infectious burst of laughter meets my ears, and I've never been more thankful to have a semi-decent sense of humor. Oh man, thank goodness they can both connect on their great sense of humor. Reading this right now was just like reading a stand-up comedy routine. It's so funny that I forgot to laugh. But for some reason, Ben can't seem to understand why Fallon would be suspicious of his intentions. He says, "Do you think I'm pretending to flirt with you to make you feel better about yourself, and she says, aren't you? And he wonders, does she really think that? Do people really not flirt with her? Is this because of her scars or because of her insecurities about her scars? Surely guys aren't as shallow as she's implying. Aside from the fact that he has to be completely out of touch to not believe that men can be that shallow, what does he mean by people not flirting with her because of her insecurities about her scars? If someone has been disfigured, let's not blame their lack of attention from men as a result of their insecurities about being disfigured. Fortunately, Ben reassures her that he at least finds her attractive. You want to know what I thought when I saw you for the first time? The first time you walked past me, before I interrupted your lunch date with your father, I stared at your ass the whole time you were stomping away, and I couldn't help but wonder what kind of panties you had on. That's all I thought about the entire time you were in the restroom. Were you a thong girl? Were you going commando? Because I didn't see an outline in your jeans that hinted you were wearing normal panties. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see your face. I had been listening in on your conversation and already knew I was drawn to your personality. But what about your face? People say not to judge a book by its cover, but what if you somehow read the inside of the book without seeing the cover first? And what if you really liked what was inside that book? Of course, when you go to close the book and are about to see the cover for the first time, you hope it's something you'll find attractive. Because who wants an incredibly written book sitting on their bookshelf if they have to stare at a shitty cover? Wow, thank God he still found her attractive. Thank God someone like her can still be sexualized by a stranger. It truly isn't hopeless for her after all. Now she knows she won't be ostracized by society because we have this guy here that's imagining what kind of underwear she's wearing. For some reason, he goes on and on about this. When you walked out of the bathroom, the first thing I noticed was your hair. It reminded me of the first girl I ever kissed. Her name was Abatha. She had great hair and always smelled like coconut, so it made me wonder if your hair smelled like coconut. And then it made me wonder if you kissed like Abatha, because even though she was my first kiss, it's still one of the only ones I can remember every detail of. Anyway, so I immediately noticed your eyes after admiring your hair. You were still several feet away, but you were looking straight at me, almost as if you couldn't understand why I was staring. At this point, I'm like, bro, shut the fuck up. Why are we going on and on about some random girl named Abatha, who never appears in the book? You should have wrapped up this conversation like 12 sentences ago. You know your creative writing class isn't evaluated based on word count, right? Let's try practicing a writing skill called being concise. I saw the scars for the first time, and just as I noticed them, you darted your eyes to the floor and let your hair cover most of your face. And you know what I thought in that moment, Fallon? I was so relieved because I could tell with that one simple movement that you were really insecure. And I realized, since you obviously had no idea how fucking beautiful you were, that I might just actually have a chance with you. And so I smiled because I was hoping if I played my cards right, I might get to find out exactly what kind of panties you were wearing under those jeans. You really gotta admire how this guy just says the quiet part out loud. See, most guys don't admit that they specifically look for insecure girls so they can take advantage of that for their own benefit. But he just goes on and admits it. We love transparency. He's like, thank God you're so insecure so that you can put up with me undressing you in my mind, because you will think this is a green flag. And somehow this does work because Fallon is so charmed by him that she invites him back to her apartment to help her finish packing for a trip to New York that night. She introduces him to her roommate Amber and Amber's boyfriend. Ben continues to make a charming first impression. Nice to meet you both. He points down the hall. I'm gonna follow Fallon to her room now so we can see what kind of panties she has on. Sure enough, when they are in her room and she's busy packing, he just watches her and talks the whole time, even though the whole point was for him to help her pack. But at no point in the scene was there ever a line where he actually helps her. But he does go through her drawers and he says this, "Is that your panty drawer?" He reaches around and grabs a pair. I pull them out of his hand and toss them toward my suitcase. Hands off, I tell him. He walks around me and leans his elbow against the dresser. If you're packing underwear, that means you don't go commando. So by process of elimination, I figured out that you're currently wearing a thong. Now I just have to find out what color it is. I toss the contents of my drawer toward my suitcase. It takes a lot more than smooth talk to get me down to my panties, Ben the writer. Was this actually smooth talk though? Because I'm pretty sure this guy's only personality trait is that he is obsessed with underwear. There's like nothing else going on inside his head. And this running joke is clearly what Colleen Hoover thinks a charming young guy is supposed to act, given the fact that the main character considers this to be smooth talk. Is it though, or is it just a one-dimensional personality? I mean, this is barely a personality at this point. He's just repeating the same joke over and over. So Ben invites her to dinner because he has reservations at a fancy restaurant. He sifts through her clothes to figure out what she's gonna wear at dinner, and he's like, too long, too ugly, too dressy. And then he finds the perfect outfit. It's a little black dress that her mom bought for her. She never wears it because she's self-conscious about her scars. So she says no, and he says, no, I'm paying for dinner, so I get to choose what to stare at while we eat. So clearly there's this trend here where Ben has this very antiquated macho way of thinking for how courtship should be, but it's disguised under a boyish charm. What could go wrong with this path that we're about to go down here? Fallon explains why why she feels uncomfortable wearing the dress, and she says, my mother bought me that dress last year when she was going through her let's fix balance stage, but she has no idea how uncomfortable it is to be in my skin, so please don't ask me again to wear that dress because I'm much more relaxed in clothes that don't show too much skin. I don't like making people uncomfortable, and if I wore something like that, they would feel weird looking at me. Ben replies, okay, but it's your own fault people feel uncomfortable looking at you. Excuse me? Did this man really just fucking say that? I would have kicked him out at this point because what in the victim blaming is this? He's like, no, people don't treat you poorly because of your disfigurements. It's because you let your disfigurements make people treat you poorly. People don't feel uncomfortable when they look at you because of your scars, Fallon. They're uncomfortable because you make people feel like looking at you is wrong. And believe me, you're the type of person people want to stare at. People want to stare at you. Believe me, I'm one of them. But when everything about you screams look away, then that's exactly what people are going to do. The only person who gives a shit about a few scars on your face is you. What in the motivational speech bullshit is this? The only person getting in your way is you. It's not society that's the problem. Shallow assholes and beauty standards don't exist at all. It's all in your head. But his TED Talk does seem to work in giving her the courage to wear the dress though, because she lets him help her put it on. It's a very intimate moment of undressing, and then he says, fucking beautiful, he says with a slow grin, and red. Red? I look down at the dress, but it's perfectly black. Your panties, he says as a clarification, they're red. She is just so deeply touched by this moment that she starts to cry. Girl, stand up. Also, I want to point out this detail when they hug in this scene. After another minute or two of me trying to rein in my erratic emotions, I'm finally calm enough to realize that he doesn't smell so good when my face is pressed against a shirt he's been wearing for 2 days. This guy doesn't even fucking shower. I know his ass is leaving streak marks. Stand up. This sweet, touching moment is punctured by the end of this chapter where he leaves her bedroom and announces to her roommate. He shuts the door, but I can still hear what he says to Amber and Glenn as soon as he walks into the living room. They're red. Her panties are red. Wow, what a happy ending to this chapter. Finally, she's being treated equally to other women by being objectified. So Ben goes home to get ready for dinner and returns an hour early. She has a dress on now and her makeup and everything, and he continues to charm her. I want to kiss you really, really bad, and I'm doing everything in my power not to do that yet. To which she replies, do you always look like you're about to puke when you feel like kissing a girl? And he says, not until you. I didn't mean the thought of kissing you makes me sick. I meant I want to kiss you so bad it's making my stomach hurt. Kind of like blue balls, but in my stomach instead of my balls. She starts laughing and brings both of her hands up to her forehead. What am I gonna do with you, Ben the writer? I like how she keeps on calling him Ben the writer to remind us after all of his eloquent explanations that he's supposed to be a writer. So Ben and Fallon lay on her bed, and this becomes an intimate moment because he starts to touch her, which is a really big deal for her because she's been so self-conscious about her body and her scars. I wonder if I'm the only one who has ever touched her scars before. I've had accidents in the past where I burned myself attempting to cook, so I know what it feels like when a burn heals. I'm not sure about making this comparison. I don't think burning yourself while cooking is the same as roasting in a literal fire that has disfigured you, but I appreciate you trying to relate to her, I guess. This must have been excruciatingly painful, but for whatever reason, when I touch you, ... I like the way your skin feels. At this point, I'm like, does he have a fetish for burn victims or what? Like, it's great that he finds her attractive, but he just emphasizes her scars so much that now it's just fucking weird. Obviously, we do find out later why he's so hung up on the scars, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. For now, I'm just thinking this guy has a weird kink. I suddenly feel grateful for her scars ... because they're a reminder of how it could have been much worse. Bitch, let's be fucking for real here. Wow, I'm so grateful that you're physically fucked up from this tragedy that has traumatized you both physically and mentally, because it could have been so much worse. Doesn't that make you feel better? One of the things I always try to remind myself is that everyone has scars, she says, a lot of them even worse than mine. The only difference is that mine are visible and most people's aren't. I don't tell her she's right. I don't tell her that as beautiful as she looks on the outside, I only wish I could look like that on the inside. Oh my god, so mysterious. What secrets could he be hiding from his dark past? Maybe he has a tragic background story where he wasn't able to steal other people's panties. So they fall asleep and they end up missing dinner. They're just like, oh well, let's use this as an opportunity to kiss. By the way, her flight is in 3 hours. Clearly this girl does not have an ounce of travel anxiety because she's just preoccupied with making out with him. The second he slides his tongue against my lips, I immediately part them and welcome the warmth of a much deeper kiss. Soft, mesmerizing. His mouth, coupled with the way his hand is sliding down my arm, is all too much. So much. Good much. So good. I just whimpered. Wow. good much. I just really appreciate seeing the range of writing that we are experiencing from this best-selling author. I'm finished packing. He doesn't have to leave right this minute, does he? He really doesn't. Sex releases endorphins. Endorphins keep people awake. So having sex with Ben might actually benefit me before my flight. I haven't had sex in all my 18 years put together. So imagine how many endorphins I have built up in here. We could have sex before my flight and I wouldn't need sleep for days. Imagine how productive I would be when I get to New York. I mean, sure, the science checks out. You know girly wants to dick that bad when she starts doing girl math right before her flight. She said, fuck the pre-check, I'm just trying to pre-cum. Before I read out loud this next quote, I have to provide some context that something that her mom has told her is to not get into any serious relationship until she turns 23, because the mom really emphasizes that she, and I guess all girls in general, need to find themselves during this transitional time in their life when they're developing their prefrontal cortex before they get into a relationship with a guy and just surround their entire lives around him, which I can see as like valid advice, and it's probably based on her own shitty experiences with Fallon's dad. So when they're making out here, the main girl thinks, I'm dizzy, I'm so dizzy, it feels so good, my mother is crazy, stupid, insane, absurd, and she's wrong. Why would a girl care to find herself when she'll never be able to make herself feel as good as a guy can? Girl, let's pack it up here. This is such a bad way of thinking, but it truly just sets her up for the rest of the book. But statistically speaking, it's just wrong. Like, women can pleasure themselves better than men can. Like, if you look at the stats, women can give themselves orgasms at a much better rate than men can. But girly doesn't know any of this. She's just preoccupied with them making out. She thinks, grab my boob, Ben. He totally reads my mind and grabs my boob. Grab the other one. God, he's so telepathic. And this is how we lost another girly. Unfortunately for her, and fortunately for the rest of us, her roommate Amber interrupts their makeout session because Amber is supposed to drive Fallon to the airport. You know, something that she should have done like 30 minutes ago. Ben offers to drive her instead, which she does take up on that offer. I don't accept his offer right away. Amber and I won't see each other again until she visits New York in March, so I don't know if she'd be mad if I told her I'd rather a guy I've only known half a day drive me to the airport. I think accepting a ride to the airport from a dude you just met instead of your friend is pretty risky. Also, here she is throwing away her friendship for a dude that she just met. So completely going against her mother's advice in the first place. Fortunately, he does end up driving her to the airport instead of to his basement, but he decides to cheese it up with a departing quote. There's a quote that reminds me of you from Dylan Thomas, my favorite poet. He dips his head and whispers a quote against my lips. I have longed to move away, but am afraid some life yet unspent might explode. Wow. He's good. What do you mean he's good? He didn't even write the quote. He just took that from another guy. But whatever, I guess anything will work for girly over here. She's getting ready to leave for New York to fulfill her dreams of being an actress. He asks her when is her first audition, and she says she hasn't looked into it yet because of course she wouldn't have a plan. Like, why would you move to New York in the middle of the night without anything lined up? That's not spontaneous main character energy at all. But she does say that the thought of auditioning makes her nervous because people might laugh at her, to which Ben gives her words of wisdom. I hope they laugh at you, Fallon. If people are laughing at you, it means you're putting yourself out there to be laughed at. Not enough people have the courage to even take that step. That's so true, because I'm pretty sure this is also what Colleen Hoover tells herself every time she publishes a book. I'm glad it's dark because I can feel my cheeks flush. He's always saying things that seem so simple, yet profound at the same time. I mean, sure. You remind me of my mother, I tell him. Huh? Freud is rolling in his grave right now. Was your mom also constantly asking you about the color of your underwear? If so, we got a lot more things to unpack here. Speaking of her mom though, Ben thinks about how earlier Fallon was saying her mom's advice about not getting serious with someone until she is 23. And so he has this brilliant idea. What if we meet up again next year on the same day and the year after that? We'll do it for 5 years. Same date, same time, same place. We'll pick up where we left off tonight, but only for the day. I'll make sure you're following through with your auditions and I can write a book about the days we're together. She agrees to go ahead with this experiment. They block each other on social media and they make sure not to give each other their phone numbers, and so they give each other homework. So Fallon is instructed to kiss 4 boys and go to 1 audition a week, while Ben is told that he needs to read 5 specific romance novels to prepare him for writing a novel based on their relationship. Why, you might ask? For absolutely no practical reason other than for the sake of the plot. That's really the only way to romanticize your life, by giving yourself arbitrary tasks and rules. So she's in line to get inside of the airplane and there are 5 people in front of her. 5 people is enough time to talk myself out of moving to New York, so I close my eyes and think about everything in New York that I'm excited about. Hot dog stands, Broadway, Times Square, Hell's Kitchen, the Statue of Liberty, the Museum of Modern Art, Central Park. You know, as someone who also just moved to New York, this is like the most basic New York things that tourists can do. This is literally just like Googling what to do in New York and just picking the top locations from there. Like Colleen Hoover couldn't have done a little bit of research on more unique things that the character would be into, but whatever. She can enjoy having dinner at the Olive Garden in Times Square. Good for her. We speed over now to the second November 9th, and this is pretty much the format of the entire book. Every time we catch up with these characters, it takes place in every November 9th for the subsequent years. Another thing that comes with this format is that we are accompanied by an original quote by Ben, which I assume is his writing. Her tears and my soul, they live parallel lives, run, ache, burn, repeat. Her tears and my soul, they live parallel lives. Benson James Kessler. Wow, this quote is giving me the vibes of I am 12 and this is deep. You know he thought he ate with that and he put that shit on Tumblr. So on the 2nd November 9, we catch up with Ben where he's sitting at this restaurant and he's really nervous about whether Fallon will show up or not. And what makes him even more nervous is that she does show up. I try to play it cool to not come off nervous or worse, excited. I've studied enough romance novels to know girls like it when the guys are somewhat aloof. I read somewhere those kinds of guys are called alpha males. Ew, not him studying romance books like they're pickup artist books. But hey, maybe this means he will have other lines besides talking about her underwear, right? Come on, let's go inside so I can find out what color panties you have on. She's laughing that familiar laugh as I grab her hand and walk her toward the house. Dude, you need to move on from this joke. Like, this is the second year already. Colleen Hoover needs to be more creative. Like, we have to retire this, okay? Because at this point, it's just becoming a drinking game. When we switch to Fallon's perspective, this is where I realized that she booked a flight coming in and out the same day. You didn't bring luggage? He asks. I'm heading back tonight. Tonight? You aren't even staying the night in California? I can't. I have to be back in New York by 8 in the morning. My flight is at 10:30 tonight. The flight is more than 5 hours, he says, concerned. With the time difference, you won't even get home until after 6 in the morning. I'll sleep on the plane. Hell no. As someone who travels frequently, this is like the worst possible shit that you can do. How does that make any sense? Who has the kind of disposable income to be throwing away money where the time that you spend on a flight is longer than the time you spend at your destination? She couldn't just fly in like a day earlier, rent an Airbnb, stay at a friend's place. What the fuck happened to Amber? So she comes over to Ben's place and they proceed to have one of the worst conversations I've ever read in the book. I missed you, Fallon, he whispers, a lot. And screw it if I'm not supposed to admit that, but I tried the whole alpha male thing for 2 seconds and I just can't do it. So you don't get alpha Ben today. I'm sorry. Ben, I say, are you ... booksting me? He cocks an eyebrow. Booksting? Yeah, when a hot guy talks books with a girl. It's like sexting, but out loud and with books instead of sex. Nor does it have to do with text. Okay, so it's nothing like sexting, but it makes sense in my head. Don't stop, I tease in a seductive voice. Give me more, Ben. Did you read ebooks or ... I run my fingers slowly down his chest. Hardbacks. He pulls his hand behind his head and a smug look washes over his face. Oh, they were hardbacks, all right. And I'm not sure if you're ready for this, but ... I have my very own TBR pile. You should see it, Fallon. It's huge. I let out a moan, but I'm not so sure it's pretend. I have never in my life been as ashamed to be a reader as I am right now. I wish I was illiterate so that I didn't understand a single word of what I just read. I should not be reading this and knowing the terminology that they're talking about. And you know what? Maybe women shouldn't have been taught to read. Maybe the patriarchy had a point. So they do a progress check on their homework. Fallon reveals that she did try to hook up with a guy, but it didn't advance any further because she didn't want him to see her left breast because most of her left half of her body was burned and she feels bad that her boobs are asymmetrical. And Ben, of course, tries to use this as an invitation to see her boobs, and his defense is that this is for the book that he's writing. So if he wants to do it justice, the injuries are something that he'll need to talk about, so they can consider this to be research. And then Fallon is like, whoa, you're gonna write about my injuries? I'm not comfortable with that. To which he says, you listen to me. It pisses me off that you allow something so trivial to define such a huge part of you. I can't make you pretty in this book because that would be an insult. You're fucking beautiful and you're funny. And the only times I'm not completely enamored by you are the moments you're feeling sorry for yourself. Because I don't know if you've realized this yet, but you're alive, Fallon. And every time you look in the mirror, you don't have the right to hate what you see because you survived when a lot of people don't get that luck. So from now on, when you think about your scars, you aren't allowed to resent them. You're going to embrace them because you're lucky to be on this earth to see them. I find his motivational speeches to be so off-putting because while it is great that he sees her as beautiful and that he's encouraging her to have like a higher self-esteem, I don't think it's sensitive of him to say that she's allowing something trivial to define her. Like bro, the fucking left half of her body got burned up to a crisp. This was a traumatizing event for her. It's not trivial for her to be hung up about it. And it's kind of a dick move for him to be like, oh, I always think you're beautiful, except for when you feel sorry for yourself. Sorry she doesn't have a great fucking self-esteem and that's a turn off to you. I also think it's not fair for him to say that she's not allowed to feel negatively about her body because she survived while other people in like hypothetical scenarios wouldn't be as lucky. It's giving inspiration porn. It's giving the same logic as telling someone that you should be grateful to be eating this shitty plate of food because there are children in third world countries that are starving. I would hate for every time you express a valid feeling about yourself and the trauma that you've been through, this dumbass turns it into a TED talk about how you should feel grateful to be alive. Maybe she doesn't have to feel grateful all the fucking time, especially dealing with your annoying ass. That would make me the opposite of being grateful to be alive. But of course, Fallon is just so touched by his TED talk, and this segues into an intimate moment where he's pulling off her bra strap and kissing her boobs, which is obviously like a big deal because oh my gosh, he accepts her. He accepts her fucked up boobs. But then they get interrupted by someone at the door. Turns out other people just got home, and this is where Fallon meets Ben's two older brothers, Ian and Kyle. Kyle also has a fiance who's with them named Jordan, and he has this private conversation with Ben, and when Fallon is done talking with the bride-to-be, she kind of walks in the hallway where she witnesses Kyle hitting Ben. She has no context about it other than it seems like they previously just had like a tense argument prior to her walking in on them. Ben doesn't tell Fallon what happened, so she doesn't want to like overstep whatever family drama they have. So they just go to the beach together to be alone, and they continue updating each other about their lives. We find out that Fallon is doing community theater now, but then she realizes she doesn't know what Ben has been up to. Do you even have a job? She asks. I can't believe I don't know that about you. I let you fondle my breasts and I don't even know what you do for a living. Girl, at this point, that's just on you. Apparently the fire took your eyesight as well, because you're not seeing any of the red flags that we've been noticing. We find out that Ben is attending UCLA as a double major in creative writing and communications. She says, you don't need a backup plan because in a few years, you'll have a best-selling novel to pay your bills. Alright, who's gonna tell her the truth? I know some best-selling authors watch my channel. We need to tell her the grim reality of your paycheck. Ben reveals that the book he's writing about them is called November 9, despite that being a horrible title for a book. Fallon is touched by it anyway because she has always associated the date to be the anniversary of the fire. But now she has this positive association with it because November 9 has also become the date where she can look forward to seeing him every year. So that's pretty sweet. If you read the book, you know what's gonna happen. They start making out on the beach, but then 5 minutes into the kiss, Ben sits straight up and he announces that he wants a tattoo right now. So he takes her to a tattoo place to get the word poetic across his left wrist written inside a music staff. Very Pottery Barn aesthetic. I didn't know that you could get tattoos at Claire's now. Fallon doesn't know the meaning behind the tattoo and Ben acts very cryptic about it, but I can already tell you what it means. It means that he's a 35-year-old white woman trying to impersonate the body of a 19-year-old man. You might as well just tattoo live, love, laugh while you're at it. While he gets the tattoo, they continue to have deep conversations like this one. What's your favorite color? Malachite green. I make a face. That's a very specific green, but okay. It's what color your eyes are. Also happens to be my favorite mineral. You have a favorite mineral? Do now. What's your favorite food? Pad Thai, he says. Yours? Sushi. They're almost the same thing. Not even close, he says. They're both Asian food. We're not even gonna unpack that one. Listen, we're already dealing with like the ableism inspiration porn and like the red flags of this dude constantly objectifying her. I can't tap into racism as well. Like I can't open this can of worms. So we're just gonna move on. When it's time for Fallon to catch her flight, Ben drives her to the airport. She sits on the plane and then much to her surprise, he shows up right next to her seat with a plane ticket. I forgot to give you homework for this year. He hands me a folded sheet of paper. I had to buy a plane ticket in order to get it to you before you took off. So that means you have have to follow through with it or I'm out of money for not. And who actually says not? Anyway, that's all. Totally not an alpha move, but whatever. Again, where are these people getting this disposable income where this guy can just buy a plane ticket for a flight leaving the same day, literally within the next few minutes, which you know must have been expensive as hell. And he would have had to park his car at the airport because he had driven her to the airport in the first place. You know, parking at the airport usually comes with a fee, just so that he can give her a folded piece of paper for like 2 seconds and then bounce the fuck off. I'll tell you who doesn't have that kind of money. Creative writing majors. The piece of paper that he gives to her is this letter where he says, for this year, there's only one thing I want you to do. Go visit your father. I know, he's an asshole, but he's the only father you have. And when you told me you haven't spoken to him since last year, I couldn't help but feel at fault for that. I feel guilty for the fight you guys got into because my butting in didn't help matters. I should have stayed out of it, but had I stayed out of it, I wouldn't have had the privilege of finding out what kind of panties you had on. Okay, we're gonna ignore the panty line because I'm fucking tired of it at this point. The homework that he assigns to her is for her to just get in touch with her father again. But I feel like if she doesn't want to be close to her father, that's her choice. You don't know their relationship, so don't meddle. Especially to guilt trip her and hold a $400 plane ticket over her head, he should throw away. Like, first of all, nobody asked you to spend $400 on a ticket for a flight that you didn't even go on. But second of all, I don't understand why fiction seems to believe that characters should have a good relationship with their family just because they're blood related. Like, what has the dad done to deserve any kind of forgiveness? Has the dad tried to connect with her? Why does she have to put in that emotional labor? Now, if Ben were a true mastermind, he would know that by triggering her daddy issues again, she would become more vulnerable and susceptible to Ben's charms by filling the hole of her absent father with another shitty man in her life. Maybe that's the game plan here, and if so, honestly, that's pretty smart of him. But unfortunately, when we speed through to the 3rd November 9th and we have to read his writing again, I highly doubt that he actually is smart, because his writing goes, she loved me, in quotations. She kissed me, in bold. I tried to keep her, in all caps. She left with an ellipsis, ... Benton James Kessler. What in the Tumblr poetry is this? Now, I know that creative writing major definitely ain't making you enough money to afford you that ticket. Anyway, the 3rd reunion is a very dramatic one because we see that Fallon is waiting for Ben. He hasn't shown up, but fortunately, he does call the cafe where she's waiting since they don't have each other's phone numbers, and he tells her that Kyle was killed in a car accident and he cannot come. Super shitty, but completely understandable. They decide to do a rain check on this reunion and just see each other next year. However, much to Ben's surprise, in the next chapter, she actually gets a plane ticket right after that phone call so that she can go to him and offer support in his time of grief. So again, that means she booked a flight within the same day just to be there for him, and whatever flight was like leaving within the next few minutes. That's really sweet. But again, where is this disposable income coming from? Because I know you don't have that many travel points on you, and I know community theater ain't paying shit for you. The only explanation that I can think of is that this entire book is just a commercial funded by United Airlines. Anyway, Ben is so moved by this gesture of support, and they even have sex, which I'm sure is doing great wonders for his brain chemistry after dealing with all of these life events, because nothing makes you fall harder than trauma bonding. Since this is a heterosexual romance, it is important to note that she is losing her virginity to him, because apparently that's a big deal for the heteros. He says, I don't want to be your first, Fallon. I want to be your last. I touch his cheek with the tips of my fingers and smile up at him. I want you to be my first and last. Girl, you barely know him. I guess we gotta rack up travel points somehow. So right before he gets inside of her, he whispers, Fallon, thank you for this beautiful gift. Beautiful gift? You mean her virginity? That's a gift to you? That's fucking weird. After they have sex, they decide to end the experiment to just be together. Because fuck it, why not? Why have they been unnecessarily making their communication more difficult? Why have they been wasting all their money with these flight tickets? Let's just be together. Ben even offers to move to New York with her. Wise decisions are being made in post-nut clarity. So they seem like they're gonna have their happily ever after. But Fallon starts to consider a few other factors later on when, in the middle of the night, she heads to the kitchen and runs into Kyle's wife, Jordan. As you remember, Kyle is dead, so Jordan is now a widow. Based on their conversation, she learns that Jordan is gonna be staying in the house all by herself with her unborn baby, because that's another salt to the wound. She's pregos as well. And you know, this is like a really shitty situation for any person to go through alone. Fallon also learns that Ben signed an agent for his book, and that's the tipping point for her, because even though she wants them to be together, she doesn't want to be the reason he doesn't finish his book or look back on this later in the future and wonder if he made the wrong choice. So even though they have 3 more years left for their original promise of getting together when she's 23, she thinks those 3 years could make a huge difference in his success as an author. So it's really important that he finishes the book. I don't know why she thinks that just because he moves to New York, he suddenly can't work on his book anymore. Maybe it's because the story is supposed to be about them and they need to continue the experiment in order to be authentic. But for the sake of drama, she decides to leave. And this is like for his own sake. And he argues with her over this decision. And so she tells him a lie just for the sake of making it easier for him to let go of her. And this lie is that she doesn't want to love him. He interprets this as a breakup. So that's how we end this chapter, on a very sad note where they must separate once again. Then we speed over to the 4th November 9th. We get more bad Tumblr poetry. In her darkness, she is silent. In my darkness, she screams. Benton James Kessler. You know, are we even sure he has a literary agent? Because based on the excerpts that I'm reading, things are looking fucking grim. So on this 4th reunion, Fallon moves back to Los Angeles because she decided to be an acting teacher, and she is waiting for Ben at the restaurant, and she's excited to tell him about the move because now that she's finally in the same city as him, they can be together. She doesn't have to feel guilty that Ben moved all the way to New York and gave up everything for her. Now this just makes it a lot easier. Ben shows up with his nephew, and he lets it slip that he and Jordan have become a couple since they last saw each other. And apparently this past year, when he's been helping her out with the baby and grieving over his brother, they really trauma bonded. And so Fallon is absolutely heartbroken. She's like, what do you mean you fell in love with your dead brother's wife? It's a very soap opera. She also reveals that last year when she said she didn't want to love him, it was a lie. So now he's like, it was a lie? And he's just reeling over that revelation because maybe if he had known she actually had feelings for him and that they weren't truly breaking up, he wouldn't have banged his dead brother's wife. It's very messy, and this is truly the result of what happens when you purposely limit your communication to one time a year. So this is where Fallon tells Ben that the experiment truly is over now, because if you're playing baby daddy to your dead brother's wife, that's a little bit too messy for the storyline here. I won't be back next year. I'm sorry if this ruined your book. That's the last thing I wanted, but I just can't do this anymore. And he says, fuck the book, Fallon. It was never about the book. It was about you. It always was. Okay, so why the fuck did we do any of this? It's the way that these bitches brought upon the problems themselves. Literally none of this needed to happen if they had just dated like normal people. But no, they had to do it for the plot. So then we cut to the 5th November 9th. By this next year, Fallon goes out with her friends and there's a boy that she's been seeing in order to forget Ben. This doesn't quite work out for her because Ben shows up at that club where the group is. He begs Fallon to come home with him so he can explain his situation to her, and she agrees to go with him. And so Ben explains that his relationship with Jordan is over. So that means they can be together again. So I guess we just wasted a whole year for nothing. Ben and Fallon become intimate. He says, I love you, Fallon, more than poetry, more than words, more than music, more than your boobs, both of them. Do you have any idea how much that amounts to? I mean, with a speech like that, how can you not get back together? He loves you more than both titty, and they say chivalry is dead. So after they do it early in the morning, Fallon wakes up and she's hungry, so she searches for a shirt to wear while she eats. She goes into Ben's closet, and that's where she finds his manuscript. And she's like, oh, I don't know if I should read it or not, but she decides, okay, I'll just read like one scene, just a couple of pages. And she already knows what she wants to read about, and that's the day that Kyle hit Ben. What's the tea? What really happened that day? And then she is shocked to read the truth. In this excerpt where Kyle and Ben are arguing, he pushes Ben to the wall and he says, does she know, Ben? Does she have any idea that you're the one who started the fire? That you're the reason she almost died? The drama of it all! All this time, I thought he was a weirdo with a burn victim fetish, but it turns out he is a weirdo with a burn victim fetish and an arsonist. Fallon is so shocked by this that the writing of her inner monologue depreciates in quality. I need water. I get water. I need to sit down again. I sit down. Spin, spin, spin. The web of possible lies is spinning. My mind is spinning. My stomach is spinning. It even feels like the blood in my veins is spinning. So then she flips to the prologue and she reads that the death of Ben's mother is somehow connected to the fire because both of them happened on the same day of November 9th. And of course, Ben wakes up at this time and he's like, I can explain, but she just refuses to listen to him. While he's trying to explain things to her, he tries to get her to take the manuscript with her, but she refuses and she just gets the fuck out of there. So then we move forward to the 6th November 9th. We have to suffer his bad writing again, where it says, fate, a word meaning destiny. Fate, a word meaning doom. A year has passed by this point. Fallon has found it impossible to forget about Ben. It's revealed that after she left, she filed a restraining order against him, which is probably the only sensible decision she's made throughout the entire book. She also contemplates seeing a therapist. I'm like, girl, you should have done that a long time ago. You consider this now? But that's just a passing thought. She never actually goes to therapy. Probably because if she did, the entire book wouldn't have fucking worked in the first place. So on November 9th, she plans to spend the day alone. However, Ben shows up at her door and he leaves a copy of his manuscript on her front doorstep. And he leaves a note that says, I know you owe me nothing, but I'm not asking you to read this manuscript for me. I want you to read it for yourself, because when you love someone, you owe it to them to help them be the best version of themselves that they can be. What I'm wondering is, how would reading this manuscript help make her become the best version of herself? Personally, your excerpts that we've been reading throughout this entire book has done more psychic damage to me. So I don't know how rereading the trauma that she experienced at you, the perpetrator, would do her any favors. So obviously she doesn't read it, because why the fuck would she? But her mom visits her the next day. Since she left the manuscript in the living room, the mom reads it and she insists that Fallon needs to read it. I'm not going to pretend that I know what you've gone through, but after reading those pages, I can assure you that you aren't the only one who was scarred in that fire. Just because he chose not to show you his scars doesn't mean they don't exist. Here they are. He's put his scars on full display for you, and you need to show him the respect he showed you by not turning away from them. Dude, what kind of mother would be like, yeah, I know he violated your trust and nearly killed you and most definitely traumatized you for life, and also lied to you while taking your virginity and also stalked you and all these other things, but just give him a chance. His scars are worse than yours because they're invisible. And so she does read the manuscript as per her mother's insistence, and she learns that Ben was only 16 when he found his mother's body after she died by suicide. The manuscript reads, 30 minutes is a long time to sit and stare at the bloodstain that remains in the carpet. If I tilt my head to the left, it looks like a hippo with his mouth wide open, about to devour prey. But if I tilt my head to the right, it looks like Gary Busey's mugshot. For reference, this is what Gary Busey looks like. This is a very random thing to think about, but okay. Who am I to judge how someone processes trauma? He also sees a tattoo on his mom's wrist that is the word poetic written across a music step, which now explains why he got the same tattoo despite the idea sounding like it's from an older woman, because it is. Her explanation for why she got the tattoo that he remembers in a flashback is that when you're really in love with someone, you just know. She got this tattoo the day she felt that kind of love for his father. She says if she had to describe the love that she felt that day, it felt like her two favorite things thrown together, like her favorite poetic line mixed into the lyrics of her favorite song, hence the tattoo. 16-year-old Ben reflects on this and he thinks, I didn't get to read the suicide letter she left, but I was curious if she had changed her mind about selfless love, or if maybe she only loved my father selflessly, but never her own children, because suicide is the most selfish thing a person can do. You know, you better be glad your mom is dead so she doesn't cancel your ass for what's possibly the worst take in this book. But whatever, he's grieving, he's 16, I'm gonna try to roll with it. My mother would be pissed that I'm not crying right now. I'm sure attention played at least a small role in her decision. She loved attention, and not in a bad way, it's just a fact. And I'm not sure that I'm giving her enough attention if I'm not even crying yet. I think I'm mostly just confused. She seemed happy most of my life. Sure, there were days she was sad, relationships that went south. My mother loved to love, and up until the moment she blew her face off, she was an attractive woman. Lots of men thought so. Funny how both the mom and Ben have something in common. They're both brain dead. What the fuck kind of logic is this? Oh, why was she depressed? She was attractive. Lots of men liked her. There's no reason for her to be depressed. Again, I'm gonna try to chalk it up to being 16 and stupid and not knowing how to process grief. But he tries to figure out why she would do this. So instead of like reading her suicide letter, which is like probably the most likely source for where she would explain why she did it, he just goes through her phone and email. And this is where he finds out that his mom had an affair with a man named Donovan O'Neill, who is also Fallon's dad. So this is where we make the connection here between the two characters. He makes this connection suspicion that Donovan was responsible for his mom's suicide, because obviously the only reason why a woman would be driven to kill herself is because of a man. So he goes over to Donovan's house, where Donovan drives home with his car. Donovan gets a call and seems upset by whatever he hears over the phone. Most likely he heard the news about Ben's mom's death. He turns off the phone, and in his emotional state, he kicks a gas can over in frustration and he goes inside. Ben uses this as an opportunity to grab the gas can and pour it over the side of the car and light it on fire because he's so upset about this man who had driven his mom to suicide. He goes back home, but he notices the fire behind him keeps getting bigger, and he realizes that the fire has spread all the way to the house. And he's like, oh my God, what did I just do? What did I just do? But he's like, you know, trying to keep it chill while having like a panic attack at the same time. And I don't know if you can hear this, but the ambulance is also making noises outside of my window. Very apt timing here. This is exactly the sounds that he's hearing. He goes home. Kyle sees he's having a panic attack. He's like, what the fuck happened? And he has to explain to his brother what he just did. Kyle asks, was anyone hurt? And Ben doesn't know, but he thinks, well, Donovan barely got inside the house, so obviously he would have time to get out, right? They turn on the TV, and this is where they find out that there was a 16-year-old girl, Donovan's daughter, who had to be airlifted from the fire because she was inside the house. The news updates for the next few hours that she's in critical condition, and then that she suffered 4th-degree burns in over 30% of her body, and then later she's expected to survive, but will have to go through a reconstructive surgery. But essentially what gets concluded is that the owner of the house, Donovan, admits to spilling fuel near a car parked outside his garage. Everyone in the news believes that this was an accident on his part, not an intentional act. Now, Ben is processing the consequences of his actions. Kyle goes into protective brother mode and tells him to take out all his clothes and put them in the washer. Don't leave any connection that he was tied to the fire. Like, don't drive by their house. Stay away from anything that could trace him to this incident. Kyle is just trying to like juggle planning a funeral for their mom right now, so he really doesn't have time for this shit. And so this kind of clarifies why Kyle was upset at Ben in present day that one time when they had like that fight. So the chapter in this manuscript ends with Ben throwing up in the toilet and realizing his mistake. The only thing my thoughts around is that girl and how I've just completely ruined her life. I drop my forehead to my arm as I sit here with a death grip on porcelain. I don't deserve to live. I don't deserve to live. I wonder if my bloodstain will look like Gary Busey. You know, obviously this is tragic, but it's really hard to take this shit seriously when Colleen Hoover pulls out lines like this. Imagine Gary Busey just reading this book and being like, now why am I in here? Now we cut to present day where Fallon is reading this chapter, and this revelation has changed the whole game for her. For the first time, she does not feel anger towards her father. Until I read Ben's words, I never knew how much I blamed my father for what happened to me. For so long I've hated him. I made it difficult for him to grieve with me over what happened. I found fault in everything he said. Every conversation we had turned into a fight. I'm not excusing that he can be an insensitive jerk. He's always been an insensitive jerk, but he's also always loved me. And now that I have a clearer picture of what happened that night, I shouldn't blame him for forgetting about me anymore. I only stayed at his house once a week, and he had just found out someone he loved had died. His mind must have been wrecked. And then for me to expect him to react with perfect precision when he sees his house is on fire is way more than I should expect of him. In a matter of minutes, he was grieving and then angry and then panicking because of the fire. To expect him to immediately remember that I had texted him 12 hours earlier to let him know that I was sleeping in his house that night is completely unrealistic. I guess in those circumstances, maybe someone could forget that their own daughter is inside their house. I mean, okay, I can believe this could happen, but he still didn't seem like a good dad, even outside of this situation. Like, she was very quick to get over that and forgive him all of a sudden. Like, even though it wasn't his fault, in his mind, he believed it was his fault. And so it was established early on that like he was apologetic, but then as the years went on, he just like stopped talking to her as much and wasn't really checking in. And he said a lot of douchey things in the beginning of the book. So I don't know. Apparently it was that easy to forgive him, so much so that after reading this chapter of Ben's manuscript, she texts her dad asking if he wants to have breakfast with her tomorrow. I guess now they're chill. Who knew that you could easily heal the strenuous relationship between father and daughter this way? So Fallon continues reading the rest of their manuscript, where 16-year-old Ben is still angsty and he blames his mom for killing herself. And his brothers get mad at him because they're like, bro, why are you saying this insensitive shit? And this is where they realize Ben never read the suicide note that she left behind. So he finally reads it, and this is where he finds out that 4 months ago, she discovered she had ovarian cancer that she would not be able to beat. So after discovering that, she decided she didn't want her sons to overhaul their lives dealing with medical bills and struggling to take care of her and not seeing their mother the same way as they knew her before, because she didn't want to deal with like her body and her brain like disintegrating and just like dying slowly. She was just thinking about their house, their savings, their college funds, their memories, like all of that she wanted to preserve, and that's why she decided it would be better for her to die now so that they can be free. After all of that tomfoolery and shenanigans with the fire, the gag is that Ben set the house on fire for literally no reason. He fucked over the main character's life for absolutely no reason at all. He just assumed his mom killed herself over a man, and he went apeshit over a stranger. He's absolutely gagged right now, and the manuscript continues on to when Ben is 18, when he finally meets Fallon in person, basically the first scene of the book when he pretended to be her boyfriend. And so we finally get to know what was really going on in his head after being haunted by grief and regret and shame for 2 years for ruining this girl's life, and now seeing her in person, what could he possibly be thinking? Her jeans, they fit her so perfectly. It looks like they were custom made, molding to every curve from her hips all the way down to her ankles. They move with her so well. I find myself wondering what kind of panties she has on under them, because I can't see a panty line. She could be wearing a thong, but she could also be going ... What the hell, Ben? How in the hell did your brain move in this direction? Yeah, I would like the answer to this as well. How did we get from lifelong guilt over ruining this girl's life to wondering what her panties looked like? That switch up happened real fast. Anyway, so Fallon is reading this manuscript and digesting everything. She similarly is also gagged, and she reaches a letter that she finds is tucked in the manuscript, and it turns out that Ben wrote Fallon a letter to convince her that he never lied to her about his feelings for her or his belief that she was beautiful. None of that was a lie. The only lie that he made was a lie of omission, because apparently, you know, that's any better. In the letter, he says he plans to wait for her at their restaurant in hopes that she will forgive him. And so now we cut to the last November 9th. Fallon arrives to the restaurant 3 minutes until midnight. He's so nervous about what she has to say to him, but she tells him, I didn't come here to forgive you. You carry so much guilt for what you did and for so long. You can't ask for my forgiveness because there's nothing to forgive. If anything, I'm here for your forgiveness. Excuse me? In what world would she ever need to ask him for forgiveness? Did this bitch get a lobotomy on the way to the restaurant? Girl, I'm begging you to stand the fuck up right now. I would be telling him, you gotta pay for all my hospital bills, you gotta pay for my therapy bills, you gotta pay collective interest for all the times you didn't tell me about all the shit that you did. I would fucking rob him of all his savings. Like, yeah, the savings that your dead mom left behind, time to fucking pay it up. But she is just so forgiving and cavalier about this. She says, you aren't allowed to apologize to me. He says, fine, I forgive myself. She laughs and says, and I forgive myself. Okay, fucking great then, I guess. You know who I'm not forgiving? Colleen Hoover. Because what the fuck is this? She's better than me, because she's really letting a lot of things slide tonight. And the real kicker here is that Fallon also reveals that she got a tattoo of an open book. On each of the 2 open pages of this book are a comedy and a tragedy mask. Books and theater, she says, explaining the tattoo. My 2 favorite things. I just got it about 2 hours ago when I realized how selflessly in love with you I am. She looks back up at me, her eyes glistening. Ben is so touched by this and tells her to come home with him so he can make her breakfast. She tells him she's actually getting breakfast with her dad tomorrow, but she'll still come home to him. And the book ends like this. Good, I tell her. Tonight you're mine. I'll just wait to cook you breakfast until the day after tomorrow, and every day after that until next November 9th when I get down on one knee and give you the most book-worthy marriage proposal in history. She slaps me in the chest. That was a huge spoiler, Ben. Did you not learn about spoiler alerts during your reading binge? I grin as I lower my mouth to hers. Spoiler alert. They lived happily ever after. And then I kissed her. And it's the 12, not the end. Far from it. I mean, what can you even say at this point? This guy is literally the worst love interest I have ever read in a book. But he did kind of gag me with the arson though. The fact that he just set fire to his house for no reason and ruined her life was the messiest shit ever. The main girl should have gone therapy from day one because all the men in her life have failed her. And this is why she now thinks she's in a great relationship. Imagine dating and later marrying a man who set fire to your house and burned you like you were a fucking marshmallow and he was making s'mores. The thing is, I'm not against soap opera shenanigans in this book because it did gag me when I found out like the plot twist and with him banging his dead brother's wife. Like that shit's messy. I like drama. I like the tea. I just don't think it was executed well. So many of the lines were so cringy. And you know, if you're gonna be cringe, can you at least like vary up the cringe instead of having the same panty line over and over? Like, come on, you're a best-selling author. Let's be creative with this shit. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this summary and I hope that you were thoroughly entertained. I would love to hear your thoughts on everything that we just read and discussed. Go ahead and unsubscribe on my channel and goodbye.